This is Joe Vitar,
This is Ramon Robles.
and we talk to fascinating people about their love of hunting, shooting sports, and the outdoors. This is Hunting Matters. Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, this week on this episode of Hunting Matters, brought to you by the Houston Safari Club Foundation, we're joined by our guest Scott Linden of Scott Linden Outdoors. Scott, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be here. We were just talking about Houston Safari Club this morning at breakfast, in fact.
Oh, yeah? Tell us about that conversation. If it was good. If it was good.
It was good, yeah. Yeah, everybody's jealous that you guys have a great gathering every year and legendary in many respects. And in fact, one of my friends may be headed your way for that very soon.
Oh, cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Scott, where are we talking to you from today? Where are you based out of?
I'm south and east of the town of Bend, Oregon.
Yeah.
Ski capital of the Northwest. Next season it'll be the golf capital. Then after that it becomes the mountain biking capital. So it's all of the above.
Nice. Yeah, my oldest son lives in Portland.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with the Bend area. Beautiful country up there. So that part of the world has always been one of my favorites because you can, like you said, you can be in the mountains in a day, you can be in the wine country in a day, you can be at the beach in a day, or less. And have you always lived in Oregon?
No, I was telling Ramon earlier, I'm a kind of a gypsy. Started in LA, worked my way up through California, got as far north as Portland, then back south, and then over to here. Finally decided I like the dry climate and the fly fishing here.
Yeah, I bet. Is it true that part of Oregon is going to secede from the state still and form its own independent territory?
Well, it already has, at least in spirit. There is truly a divide. It is the divide that everybody thinks it is. But whether or not we become part of Idaho or not is debatable.
And we're talking Oregon versus Oregon State. Is that the divide?
There is that one too. Go Ducks.
Okay. Yeah. Does Oregon State even have a college team anymore? I haven't heard anything from them in a while.
Yeah, they're a powerhouse in some sports. Football, they didn't have much of a year. Basketball, we're in the middle of it. We'll see. But they are they're a perennial top 10 baseball team.
Okay. All right.
Huh. I had no clue. I had no clue about that. And of course, Ramon, he was referring to the conservative side of the state. You know, I have a friend that lives on a farm in southern Illinois, and he has the same issue in Illinois. The Chicago thinks there's the state of Chicago, and then there's the rest of the country, or the rest of that state, which is didn't really matter, I guess, in some of their eyes. But
Washington's that way too, right? With Seattle, if I'm not mistaken.
You know, you could divide the entire West Coast, take the big mountain ranges that start up in Canada and run down the middle of Washington, down the middle of Oregon, and pretty much down the middle of California. Put those of us on the east side of that in southern Illinois, at least politically. Yeah. But, you know, we all learn to get along, and the pendulum never stops swinging. Yeah. So you just gotta, grin and bear it.
Yep.
Yeah. I heard the name Greenland's going to be available soon for any up and coming states.
Oh my.
So Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself. Of course, we want to talk about what you're doing now, but growing up, did you grow up in the outdoors, or what was your journey to that world?
Well, before there was a term for it, I was the poster boy for adult onset hunting. I didn't take it up until pretty much into my fourth career in my fifth hometown. But I was lucky enough, and I think this is where it all started. I was lucky enough as a kid in Los Angeles, of all places, to have a great scout master who took us all, the entire troop, under his wing and led us to places we'd have never gone otherwise. And I got to tell you, I was down in that country where we used to spend a lot of time 2 weeks ago hunting for the first time, and thought of Jim Wells, and thank you again, Jim, if you're still with us.
Yeah. It's and so you mentioned you had 4 different careers. How did you end up in the career or the life pathway, if you will, of hunting and fly fishing?
Well, I did a lot of other things. I was a pretty fast rat in many races over the years, from the music business, education, to publishing, which led to radio, which led to television. All those things have kind of prepared me for whatever I've done next. Learned to write, of all places, while in music school. But all of those skills have come together. And at one point in time, I just said, to hell with this. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to talk about the things I want to talk about. And let's see if anybody wants to listen to them. And started in radio in the outdoor world. I'd been in radio in the business world. I'd started a business newspaper, became the voice of the business newspaper, the face of the business newspaper on television, sold it all off to a big chain, decided I liked radio and TV, but I'd rather talk about fishing and hunting. And so that's what I did. That led in turn to more and more opportunities. I was the guinea pig, along with 2 other producers in other topic areas. Michael Bain, Robin Berg, and I created the first outdoor television shows in high definition. Beyond that, have developed 9 different TV series over the years. And now I do those. I do some of those. Plus I do a satellite radio show and a podcast. And I still write for most of the magazines in our world. I've just narrowed my focus now to fly fishing a little bit and bird dogs and bird hunting.
Is that it? Are we keeping you from something, Scott? Man.
Always.
Yeah.
You kind of glossed over it a bit, but having some experience in outdoor television, I know that you guys were pioneers in the high def world for hunting and fishing TV shows. What was that journey like? How did you come up with that? How did you pitch a network on that? Because I know all the ins, the pitfalls of outdoor television, but you guys were on the front end of that.
Yeah, we were, and it was a fascinating adventure, of course, because I'm not a technology kind of guy. I'm just a music major. But I had lots of help once I got into that world and learned flying by the seat of my pants. But the origins of high def with us and what I did may be a little different than most everybody else. I had been creating some specials for Outdoor Channel, and I'd been guest hosting somebody else's TV series for a while on Outdoor Channel. And they came to me, flew me down, wined and dined me, and said, we like what you do. You want to do a fly fishing show for us? And I said, let me think about, never mind. Yes.
Yep.
So we signed a deal, and I got to thinking about it, and called him back and said, I don't know that I can make a fly fishing show that everybody else will watch, because I think we want as many people as possible watching it. So why don't you let me put some bird hunting and bird dogs in there? And they said, okay. So I called my music school buddy that night, and I said, guess what? I'm going to do a fly fishing and bird hunting TV show. And he says, well, you're going to call it Cast and Blast, right? And I said, right. And I write it down. Yep. That becomes a title. They call a week later and they say, we like the idea. We want another show because we think the bird dog thing is real workable. So all of a sudden, I was creating the first 2 shows in fishing and hunting. Robin did stuff on scuba diving, and Michael Bain is still doing stuff on shooting.
Right.
And it's just going great from there. We were lucky. We were kind of the only guys they actually bought content from.
Nice.
Everybody else was buying their airtime and putting on whatever they, financing with a 401k or, second mortgage or something. We didn't have to do any of that.
Wow. That's unheard of. I mean, then and now, that you're not buying slots and time on television. What changes have you seen that have surprised you the most in outdoor television over the years?
That one, and to this day, most people think that we're all getting rich because the networks are so big and they're just throwing money at us by the shovelful. When most of those producers out there are barely getting by, if they're getting by at all. Most of them are losing money. The whole high definition thing has gone around the world at least 3 times. There's been several massive changes in that world. And then now it's distribution. Back in the day, cable TV was the be all and end all. Yep. Now it's about 4th place. We got free advertising supported television, streaming of various sorts, video on demand. And I'm still on 200 over the air television stations. So it's everywhere.
Do you guys do any streaming with your programming?
Yeah. My stuff is on about, depending on how you define it. I've got about 4 distribution partners who combined are probably putting it on 20 different streaming services. Got it.
And your main TV show now is Wingshooting USA, correct?
Yeah, in fact, that's the only TV show I'm focusing on right now.
Okay, what's your schedule like with that? I mean, I've been involved in some big game hunting shows, but as far as wing shooting, I'm sure the opportunities are endless. Are you guys just shooting year round, or how do you manage that television show?
Well, I'm to the point now where I have so much material in house. I don't even have to make new episodes.
Okay.
Most of them are in syndication in one way, shape, or form, and I have a library that will last me another 10 years. Wow. They've only been aired once. So when you watch a show, it's probably brand new to you, but it might have been produced 3, 4, 5 years ago. And that's worked out extremely well. That's the model that I think is going to really do outdoor show producers the best, because it is stuff that, in the old days, we'd see a few, what they used to euphemistically call classic episodes from Jimmy Houston or Roland Martin or Jim Zumbo or whatever. Those were great shows, and that's why they were classics back in the day. There aren't a lot that are produced well enough to stand the test of time. But some streamers, some other platforms don't care. They just want content.
Right.
And so they'll fill up their schedule with anything they can get their hands on. And like the other versions of television, often now they're selling that time to these guys. So it works for everybody in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
Do you think this explosion of content and ways that we can consume media has helped overall quality or hurt overall quality in programs? In what we receive?
Well, Ramon, I think it's done both. And the analogy I'll use, because I was in it and I was just thinking about a session I was in LA a long time ago in the music business, is it's quite often really helpful to the consumer to have filters or a gatekeeper or whatever you want to call it. Back in the day, if you wanted to make it as a pop star, you paid your dues, and you sang at bar mitzvahs, and then you worked your way up to a showcase, and then you got a label deal, and then you made an album. There are no gatekeepers anymore, even in that world. It's the same in TV. In TV, there used to be 1, maybe 2 networks, and then they started splitting off more and more. Yep. But still, there were program directors who decided whether your show was good enough to get on or not. Now there's so much content, and there's so much need for content. It's, how can I say this diplomatically? The standards have been lowered.
Yeah. And you know what? There's an audience for that too, I guess.
Yeah. If you're a fanatic Gould's turkey hunter, somebody out there is going to make your show, and you're going to watch every episode.
Yeah.
And that's the joy of this. That's the opposite. The other side of that same coin is if you feel creative and you feel there's a need and you're passionate about your topic, just like if you're passionate about the music you just wrote, somebody's going to listen to it because it's going to be somewhere.
Mm-hmm. What'd you do in the music industry?
I was a performer and an educator.
What instruments? Let me guess. Brass. It was brass of some sort.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wide paintbrush. I'm gonna narrow it down. I'm gonna say trumpet.
Not very often. In fact,
right.
I thought, man, I'm looking in the screen now thinking, is the picture of my tuba visible? But
Is it a
it's
tuba?
not.
Was it a tuba?
I was a pretty good tuba player, and so I was the scholarship kid, and I got all the gigs and all of that, and had a lot of fun doing it, and not just playing symphonies and not just playing brass quintets. I probably made more money playing Oktoberfests than anything else.
As a tuba player, I have no doubt.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun, and I'm grateful for it. And in fact, one of my mentors to this day, who I thank for every bit of the fact that I stick to things and I practice hard, whatever I'm working at, is David Godek. David was a mentor early on in my music career, and his lessons are sticking with me to this day.
Well, I'm a big fan of music of all sorts, and I know just enough about music and reading music and writing music. I know just enough to know that it's not easy, and anybody who can do it with a little proficiency is a very talented person. So my hat's off to you.
Well, thank you. I had a good time in that industry, enjoyed the heck out of it, capped off a career teaching at the University of Oregon. Go Ducks. And to this day, apply the lessons I learned there to almost everything I do.
Very cool.
That's awesome. And he's got an Oktoberfest mustache. I'm jealous.
Einstein guy.
Oh,
Scott Ramon just likes to wear lederhosen around, and he thinks July is Oktoberfest around the house.
Well, you know, there could be a worse attitude than a July Oktoberfest.
That's true. That's true. So you've done a lot of outdoor television and things like that. What is your favorite? And I'm gonna ask you, it's kind of a loaded question, but what's your favorite bird hunt to do? What's your favorite bird species to chase?
That's a hard question because it's as somebody responded to my version of that question yesterday. It's the one I'm hunting tomorrow.
Right, right.
Which is absolutely true. If I had to narrow it down, it would be probably a dead heat: chukars, valley quail, and sharp-tailed grouse. The joy of that is you can hunt chukars until your knees give out, and you can walk the flats and the bottoms of the creeks for valley quail on the way back to the truck. So it's almost always a twofer.
Yeah.
And when the rest of you breaks down, you go to South Dakota or Montana, and you can walk those gentle slopes with no lava rock on them for a bird that it's really capturing my heart, and that's the sharp-tailed grouse.
What do you think? I got a question for you. I heard an ugly rumor about you. I'll go ahead and ask it now. Is it true that you've been after every upland bird except ptarmigan?
No, I'm not a bucket list guy.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
if I was presented with the opportunity, I probably would.
Yeah.
You'll never see me chasing Himalayan snowcock up at the 14,000 foot level.
Right.
But I do some ptarmigan.
Yeah.
But what I'm shooting at is to a degree less important than why I got into this world and why people watch my TV show, listen to my podcast, or for that matter, read the magazine articles I write. I like to think what I'm doing is what they all want to do, and that is watch my dogs work. And I do a survey every year. I've been doing it for 14 or 15 years now. I send out a survey and I ask all my followers, why do you bird hunt? And number one on the list is always the same: watch my dog work. Number two, and these are coincidentally the reasons I'm in this world. Number two is to be with friends and family. in the field. Number 3, see beautiful places. So one or more of those things is always going to happen no matter what kind of bird I end up getting a shot at. I'll take them all. And I have. I've hunted in incredible places. I added it up. I gave a speech Saturday night. I added it up. I've hunted 26 states. And every one of those hunts, barring the blizzard and the forest fire and things like that, they're all incredible.
Yeah.
And mainly because there's always dogs involved.
Yeah. See, I never thought of that aspect of bird hunting before. I'm a horrible shot, and I've only hunted deer. And I thought, well, heck, if I'm going to shoot and miss, I might as well hunt birds too, because I at least get to watch dogs.
That's exactly right. And you know, there's a saying in the fly fishing world that I someday I should make an exercise of adapting to the bird hunting world. The fly fishing version is, first thing you want to do when you try fly fishing is catch a fish, any fish. Then you want to catch a big fish. Then you want to catch a lot of fish. Then it's not about catching fish anymore. And we all make that evolution at some point.
I like that.
Some of us, because we are bad shots, and I'm television's worst wing shooter, so I've made a study of that too. But it's so seldom about a pile of bodies on a tailgate.
Yeah.
It's about all that other stuff.
That's nice.
Yeah, you know, I recall, I don't do it as much anymore, but growing up, I grew up in Louisiana, in Northeast Louisiana, we duck hunted a lot. I mean, that was kind of our existence. And you know, and recalling those memories as a kid, sneaking out of the house. Well, my mom knew I was always, but just crawling out of the house at 4 a.m. She'd rather me be in a duck blind than be out on the streets, trust me.
Yeah.
And I can remember us, you know, 4 or 5 of us getting together with our dogs, sitting in a blind, freezing to death, and having the best time. Just the camaraderie of it all. And of course, I grew up watching a lot of black labs work the water, duck hunting. All of our group had labs. But what is one of your favorite breeds to watch, and why?
I'll answer that in that order. I'm a German wire-haired pointer guy.
Gorgeous.
My first dog was, and every dog since has been. And it started out for a very odd reason. We moved up here. We both started a business. We lived in the country, and my wife said, we're getting a dog.
Sure.
I tried my best. It didn't work, so we're getting a dog. She finally relents and says, you can pick the dog out. So we're driving down the main street in town, and in this red pickup parked along next to the bank is the ugliest animal I've ever seen. So I tell her, that's the kind I want. Hoping against hope that she'll say, well, then forget it. But no, she says, pull over. And we park, we get out, we start walking over to the red truck. About then, my wife's long lost sorority sister comes out of the bank. They hug, they kiss, they do the secret handshake. And then my wife says, is that your dog? Yes. And it's pregnant.
Oh, how about that? Come on.
So 8 weeks later or whatever it was, we pick up this squirming ball of fluff, take it home. As we start exercising it, we're living in the country, so there's fields everywhere. He's running back and forth in this field. And then he stops. And one foot comes up. And then his tail comes up. And then there goes a pheasant. I said, man, if he'll do that for me, I guess I'll go buy a shotgun.
Yeah.
I was 35 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
I'm still learning every day.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great breed. I love that story. That's awesome. Yeah, there's something about I don't want to be cliche, meditative, introspective, whatever. When you watch those dogs work and watch a good dog work, and you know, I never trained or bred working dogs for hunting purposes, but I'm always amazed by these animals and seeing what they can, not only what they know and what they're just innate senses lead them to do, but the way they perform to please, you know. these different breeds.
Yeah, and think again of Safari Club, and we all get it. But our first hunting companions were dogs. We've been feeding the tribe together, our dogs and us, for millennia. And someday that'll be a book, by the way. But it all comes back to us. It's still baked into us. The DNA that we have goes all the way back to whatever they decide is now our earliest ancestor. And that whole time, we've been working with dogs. I had a writer, we had a writer trail along behind us on a TV shoot years ago, and we're sitting in the lobby of this place afterwards, and she says, watching you guys work is like watching a jazz combo. You look at Lynn looks at Ted looks at Lynn, they both look at you. You don't say anything. And then you all look at the dog.
Mm.
It is a dynamic that the hair's standing up on the back of my neck right now. There's nothing like it. Working with another critter in pursuit of a mutual objective it's magical.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it's, I feel bad for people who have not been able to watch them work to any extensive degree, but it's, you forget what a masterful skill it is and how beautiful it is to watch them work. And I have the images of a kid of these these labs jumping off a tree stump to retrieve birds and splashing in the water. And I'm like, man, these dogs never give up. I mean, they're constantly wanting to have a good time and please the owners. On another totally different topic, Ramona and I have had this conversation with several of our guests, but you being a bird guy and having traveled over so much of the U.S. and other areas, and it's a real annoyance to me, especially in these wide open areas of the country. I flew into Kodiak, Alaska last year and saw one, but these windmills, and their effect on habitats and populations, these turbines, and we have them all over the state of Texas now, as far as you can see in some areas. And it's just, I kind of wanted to get your take on it. We hear the stories about, it's decreasing, our bird populations are decreasing greatly and things like that. So I'm going to kind of rely on your expertise and experience to kind of enlighten our audience a little bit about these turbines and these energy fields.
Well, it's a two-edged sword. Number one, I'm not convinced that energy is actually renewable. And now we're seeing the pictures of all the buried turbine blades. After 10 years, they're obsolete. They have to be thrown away. Thrown away?
Yeah.
But barring that and the inefficiencies of that industry, there's no doubt in my mind it's impacting our bird population. You put anything vertical in game bird country or bird country of any sort, and all the avian predators are going to use that perch. That's a perch they didn't have before. Most of our windmills are in pheasant country, rolling fields of wheat. So there aren't any vertical perches. Now that there's a lot more avian predators. Then those spinning turbine blades, and I'll give you a perfect example. So I'm calling somebody to interview him on the podcast a few years back. He says, well, I can't do it between this time of year and this time of year because I'm down in that place. I said, oh, really? What are you doing down there? There's no bird hunting. He says, no. My dogs and I have been contracted by the wind energy company to pick up all the dead birds that were killed by the blades.
Wow. Jeez.
So that does happen as well.
Yeah. Are we talking, graveyards full of these birds? I mean,
The guy's got a full-time job for 4 months a year.
Wow. Yeah, that's hard to believe. I'm glad you shared that with us, because I think that's the thing. People, they see one thing and they think, well, it's great, but they don't understand the repercussions. And for the life of me, I can't understand why, people see dead whales and dead birds and go, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread. This is our next alternative energy source here. No effect on the environment whatsoever. And then, when they start putting these things up, 6 months later, you start getting reports, or 2 years later, getting reports where, oh, the population of birds in the U.S. has been cut in half. Well, I wonder what one of those factors could be.
Yeah.
Well, and just for the record, another one of those factors is house cats.
Mm-hmm.
The average house cat, outside house cat, will kill a bird a day.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, most
Yeah,
of them are juncos and canaries and whatever else, but some of them are game bird chicks.
Sure. I never even thought about the predator perch. And I mean, I never thought about, these birds are basically operating out of whatever tree or telephone pole they can get on. But now they've got a variety of sniper positions, if you will, that they can operate from. That's
Exactly.
I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
Switching over here to fly fishing. Fly fishing you did all your life, or is that something that came later in life?
Same thing. When I was in the education world, at lunch one day, my friend across the table said, "Man, you are really stressed out. Your head's going to explode. Let me show you something after school." He pulled out a fly rod and he started casting right there on the lawn at the school. And he said, "You should try some of this." And I did. And it might have kept me slightly more sane than I would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
Again, full on adult, grown up kid who didn't learn all of that as a youngster, didn't have an adult male in my life per se, in the family situation. So all this stuff, you find it out of desperation or motivation, and then it just clicks. And that's how it worked for me.
That's interesting. I got a bunch of questions, but the first one is, what is the appeal to you specifically about fly fishing? I mean, the people who do it that I've talked to all give me different answers, but what is it about fly fishing that appeals to you the most?
I've written on this topic. I've done a lot of seminars on it. I've taught hundreds of people how to fly fish in groups and that sort of thing. And I think the things that keep coming back to me are, number one, you seldom fly fish in an ugly place. Some scientists will tell you that the moving water in a trout stream creates negative ions which make us feel good.
Yep.
I'm a big believer. There's a bit of a challenge. There's some strategy involved. A famous author that I used to talk to once in a while called it a 3-dimensional chess game. So there's all of those aspects of it. And you can take it as far as you want, or you can just go out and have a good time. Yeah. It's meditative. And as Robert Travers says in Testament of a Fisherman, someday I might catch a mermaid.
Awesome. Hey, Scott, so if somebody's listening and they want to, pardon the pun, test the waters on this and start getting into fly fishing, what are your recommendations? Should they go to a local fly shop? Should they try to find an expert close by? How does someone get started? Because fly fishing, to me, I've done it a little bit, not to any extensive degree. It seems expensive and overwhelming to begin with.
It can be, and that keeps a lot of people away from it. And so that would be the first thing I'd suggest is it doesn't take a lot of work. It doesn't have to be expensive, and just blow off all the pipe smoking tweed wearers out there and have fun with it. Yeah. Find a shop that can help you with those aspects of it. There's a trillion YouTube videos on how to do everything. But for a couple $100, you can be a fly fisher, and you can go to some place that's beautiful. You may or may not catch a fish, but it's worth it even if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the few times I've done it, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, I've done redneck fly fishing. We've actually cast for panfish and bass and stuff in the bayous, but I definitely would like to take on more of a, the grown-up version of fly fishing where I'm standing in a river. What are you thinking about, Ramon?
Well, go ahead.
No, what are you thinking?
Before I forget, and then I do have one other recommendation. I'm a big believer, and I love this guy. He was taken from us too soon, but his name is Sheridan Anderson, and he wrote a comic book called The Curtis Creek Manifesto. I carry a half dozen of those in my truck during trout season, and I hand them out to anybody who looks like they're having trouble fishing. It is the ultimate graphic rendition of all the fundamental things you need to know to become a fly fisher. $8 and you've got the manual right there. No hoity-toity talk, no Latin names for the insects. It's a comic book, but it's the best beginner's fly fishing manual I've ever seen.
That's incredible. What's the name once again?
Curtis Creek Manifesto.
Curtis Creek Manifesto. Okay.
It's probably in its 101st printing by now.
Got it.
So I've never.
Yeah, go ahead, Ramon.
I've never fly fished before, and I've never seen it done up close. I've seen people, I guess, tie line. I've seen people, work real close with the magnifying glass doing stuff. So this is going to sound like a really stupid question, Scott, and Joe's used to my stupid questions. So you have what is supposed to be a bug at the end of this line, and you're just dropping it on the top of the water? Is that what's going on when you're fly fishing?
Yeah, for the most part, fly fishing is instead of a spinner or a worm or a power bait or something like that, you're using a little imitation of a real insect. It could be an insect that is floating on the top of the water. It could be an insect that's below the surface of the water. Okay. Could be a little minnow-like critter, something like that. And the fundamental difference between fly fishing and other kinds of fishing is the weight of your fly line is what propels the fly to where you want to put it. So you need to, unlike regular spin casting or spinning or anything like the bait casting, you have to kind of learn to work the rod in a different way. It's a real simple physics lesson, but that's the difference. The weight of the line moves the fly that's tied to the end of the line. It takes 10 minutes. Some of the best fly fishing students I've ever had are people from 10 years old to 110, quite often women, who understand that it's not about brute strength. It's about manipulating that rod to move the fly line to put your fly right in front of the fish.
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate dance, and I think the most frustrating fly fishing trip I ever had. We were in Arkansas one time, and it was windy, and I was like, "Oh, this is not happening."
Let me show you the scar right about here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a classic. I'm surprised you didn't tell me about hooking your nostril or something.
Well, I'm not going to ever admit to that in public. Thanks for pointing that out, Scott. You've been a writer for many years. I've read your stuff, most notably in Field and Stream and Outdoor Life. You've been in Sporting Classics and all the major magazines. What was your impetus behind wanting to be a writer, an outdoor writer?
Well, it's funny. I've done everything ass backwards. I was in the PR business before I went into journalism. I might be the only one. I was in the radio and TV business before I decided, I got a lot of material here that other people might find useful. And luckily, when I was in syndicated radio, I created and hosted shows for Outdoor Life and Field and Stream magazines. So I could go to those guys and say, I know I've never done this before, but you want to at least try something by me. And it turns out that I got a lot of experience, and I'm the only thing I'm qualified to do is teach. So what I find myself doing, and it doesn't matter whether it's a podcast, satellite radio, TV show, writing, I'm trying to help people become better at something they really want to become better at. And I guess I'm okay at it.
Yeah, you've been around for quite a while, and you're an excellent writer.
Thanks.
I write articles and things from time to time, and sometimes I'm kind of like, you've generated a lot of material, Scott. Let's be honest here. Over the years, how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep from repeating yourself? Because I know you've probably written on X topic 35 times. So how do you keep it new and fresh and exciting for your reader?
I don't know, are you looking over my shoulder this morning? I'm writing a piece now for Gundog magazine, for example, and it's on a topic that it continues to come back around this time of year, getting ready for next bird season. But there is so much information out there, and there are so many ways to present it that I try not to repeat myself. No editor wants the second version of what I did for that other guy. So you got to make it fresh, and you got to think about the topic and how you're presenting it in a way that's going to appeal to the editor and, more importantly, the reader. So it's about taking a moment or 10 days or a year and a half and saying, what do they need and how can I help them accomplish whatever they're trying to accomplish? It's truly marketing 101. I'm just lucky. I only write in subject areas that I know pretty well. So I'm one of those guys. I'm my audience. So I think, well, what do I need to do in February of 2025? I need to get ready for October of 2025. Or I need to tell people a story about one of the hunts I went on, because out of that story will come a tip, a hack, some advice, or just a chance for them to go, yeah, I remember when that happened to me. Wasn't it cool?
Yeah, absolutely. These days of social media and immediate gratification and open lines of communication. Before, I'm guessing you probably heard about your articles and your pieces usually through letters to the editor and things. Are you able to get more feedback from your readers now than before?
Yeah, and I love it. Like I said, I actually survey my followers every week. I take it back, every other week.
Yeah.
I have a newsletter that goes out to 20,000 people, and there's a little survey in every one of those, plus that big one at the end of the year. So I know what they're thinking all the time. And then I talk with them all the time. They're sending me emails. They correspond on social media. We're one big fraternity.
Right.
And people want to tell you about their hunting stories, and I want to tell them about mine. I'm just lucky enough that they'll listen to mine, but I listen to theirs as often as possible. And I think that's the joy of technology today. There's no roadblocks. There's fewer gatekeepers. Yes, we still have editors.
Yeah.
Or a programming director somewhere at a TV station or a radio station. But we also have alternate routes to communicate directly with the source on both ends. So, and I love it because I'm passionate. I'm not going to write about Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. But if you want to know how to keep your dog's feet in good shape, I got some thoughts for you.
Yeah, you're the guy.
Well, being the guy, Scott, and being somebody who's been in the business, who is well seasoned as you are, how would you judge Joe and I as podcast hosts so far?
First off, I don't know if well seasoned is an insult or a compliment. I'll take it as a compliment.
That's what it was meant.
And I'll tell you in a minute. But here, speaking of those, so when I was doing local radio, I'm in the grocery store and I'm talking to this one. I'm probably saying, "Get out of the way! You're in front of my beer. Get over." And she says, "Oh, you're Scott Linden?" Yeah. I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Oh, you sound taller on the radio." But you're doing great. I'm having a great time.
All right.
I love talking about the stuff we're talking about.
I appreciate that. Joe has a ego problem, so it needs to be rubbed every now and then.
Well, it's funny. We all have one.
Yeah.
It's all in how we manage it. And I'm going to tell you, about 12 years ago, I decided, I want to do more of this. I want to be face to face. So I created this, I guess today we call them brands, called Fur, Feathers, Friends. Think about it. Fur, dogs, feathers, birds, friends. That's one of those top 3 things.
Yeah.
So we got all the stuff we want. It started out as a gathering. I would tell everybody, I'm going to be in Topeka, Kansas on these days. Come on out. Let's go hunting. Or at least let's have a beer after the hunt and trade stories. That turned into an incredible opportunity. It's now I call it the somewhat annual Fur Feathers Friends thing. And it's changed in various ways over the years. We had a mass gathering. We had hunting guides from 50 states. I'm sorry, 21 states. 50 hunting guides from 21 states come out and guide veterans and active duty military at one of our hunts. We've had variations on that, and we'll have more variations on this year. Furfeathersfriends.com is all about individuals having their own hunts and taking somebody new hunting to show off their dog. Let me say it one more time. Furfeathersfriends.com.
Very clever.
Awesome. And Scott, I think we had traded some notes before the show. You mentioned the R3 initiative, recruitment, retention, and reactivation. That definitely falls in line with that initiative across the country.
Yeah.
How long have you guys been doing that?
Well, that particular effort's been about 12 years.
Okay.
But the very first TV show I created for Outdoor Channel, Cast and Blast, had a segment called Take Your Kid Hunting. And that was back in the early 2000s. We were doing R3 before they came up with a name for it.
Yeah. I've had that conversation with several people. Like, oh, we've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
And we didn't have to call it anything. Just take a buddy hunting.
Yeah. We just did it.
Scott, what is your outlook on the future of outdoor writers in this country? Because I know I've been part of outdoor writing organizations over the years that have kind of come and go and changed and modified and things like that. And always, when I hear, oh gosh, we need, we can't find younger people coming up through the ranks to do this, that, and the other, or to be part of an organization. What is your outlook on it?
Much like the music business I was in, and then much like TV, anybody can be a writer now. There's, if nothing else, you start your own blog and you just put all your stuff up there. Or if you can only string together 25 words or so, you start an Instagram. So everybody can be a writer, and that's wonderful. This is, it's a different world than it was 50 years ago.
Sure.
So we've all got distribution. Some of that distribution is good, some is not. As consumers, we'll decide what we like and what we don't like. And it'll be either dead trees with ink on them, and those are the guys we like to read, guys and gals, or it'll be some, snippet on Twitter. But whatever it is, I think it's important that everybody tries it, and I tell a lot of people, I get asked advice about writing all the time, and I'm the wrong guy to ask. I just sit down and I spill, and I get lucky. But even if all you do is write it and put it on your blog, and you and your grandma and your wife read it, it's still got value. You've expressed yourself. You've maybe focused on some things that are important to you. That's what writing is becoming. More to your point, though, Joe, the market for writing has expanded. The compensation for writing has tanked. There was a point in time, and I was there during those days, right on the tail end of that, when you could make a full-time living writing for one or two magazines. If your name was on the masthead at Field and Stream, that was your job.
Right.
The pay has gone down the toilet.
Yeah.
And it will continue to go down the toilet because everybody wants to be a writer. And more power to them.
Yeah.
The cream always rises to the top.
Sure.
And some people are going to get paid pretty good money to be in the bigger outlets, but there's always room for more.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I kind of liken, I kind of like an NFL football to outdoor writing. And I know it's a weird analogy, but when I was a kid, I followed one team in the pro, and I could expect to see the same quarterback until he retired. And I knew all the players and that sort of thing. Same thing with outdoor magazines, Field and Stream and Outdoor Life. I always knew there was going to be Grits Gresham and yourself and other people like that were always in those magazines. And I was looking for those articles as a kid every time. Oh, what did he write or what did she write that, this issue? And that, it's like you said, that's a perfect description of that. It's like, where's my favorite writer now? Oh, well, he's trying to make a living somewhere, somehow, wherever he can. So, you've seen, you've been a pioneer in outdoor writing as well as the outdoor television industry. And now we've all found ourselves in the podcast world. So you not to be outdone, you have a podcast as well. Tell us a little bit about it. What's it called? What's it about? And where can we find it?
Well, it is the ultimate iteration of what I did. For 20 years, I made radio shows for Field and Stream and Outdoor Life. And in one of their many ownership changes, they pulled out of everything except print. So I stayed out of it for a while. Then I got interviewed on a couple other podcasts, and I thought, this is kind of fun. It's kind of like syndicated radio, but it can be as long or as short as you want it to be.
Yep.
And so I thought, I listen to everybody else's podcasts in our world. I haven't listened to a lot of non-bird hunting podcasts. And I thought there's really a need for a different take on how the content is provided.
Right.
A more professional, better pacing, better audio, all those things that I learned from making thousands and thousands of radio shows. I thought I could apply to the podcast world. Turns out there is a demand for that. And I'm grateful for everybody who listens. I've tried to serve them well. And that's a lesson I learned from magazines. Back in the day, Duncan Barnes was the editor-in-chief at Field and Stream Radio. And he said one day to me, he said, all we're doing is serving the needs of our audience. And that's been my, my overriding concern with everything I do, including the podcast. And it is fun to be back in that world.
Mm. The thing I like about your podcast, we're not an educational podcast by any means. We're just guys, people talking to people and catching up and figuring out what everybody's doing in the world. But I like the fact that your podcasts are very, I think the central core is education. You can learn a lot of stuff by listening to an episode of your podcast, Upland Nation.
Thank you.
It's it's one of those things where I sit in traffic Scott, listen, we live in Houston. I sit in traffic 2 hours a day going to and from the office. Yep. That's a minimum. So I listen to a lot of books and podcasts. And most of the time I don't know, Ramon's laughing, but most of the time I'm like, I need to unplug my brain and listen to a comedian or somebody talk about something that's really not reality. But occasionally I do like to listen to podcasts to learn things. And I think Upland Nation is definitely a go-to resource for if I need to learn something in a quick compact format. Definitely, I think you guys have definitely hit the recipe there.
Well, thank you. And that's kind of like I said, that's I learned that from Duncan Barnes so long ago. You better offer up something for most of your followers most of the time. We don't have a lot of rules. I tell everybody who's on the podcast, the number one rule is have a good time. Number two rule is never insult the intelligence of the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two rules that I guess a lot of people don't care to follow.
Right. Right.
We'll keep trying.
Ramon's rule is don't insult him. So
correct.
That's the only rule.
And I'm offended by everything.
I promise not to.
What was that, Ramon?
I'm offended by everything too.
Yeah. Oh my.
No, it's a great podcast, and it's definitely it's one that kind of jumped out at me right off the bat because because of the content. I mean, there's so many out there. We all get lost in the shuffle now because everybody's run to it. But I agree with you, Scott. It's a great way to have a conversation about stuff in a long format where you can dig into stuff if you want to. People always email us like, well, what are we talking about? Can you give me some questions? I'm like, no, I can't. I learn really quickly. I don't have time to put together a list of questions for you. And we're just going to talk and see where it leads us, that's what I enjoy about doing the podcast is you just never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, and that's kind of fun, and we've done a few of these around the campfire after a hunt, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make a habit of that, but it's the same idea. Even when we're sitting here in rooms across the country, it's just a few guys sitting around talking about stuff we like to talk about.
Yep.
And out of that, my job as a host on my show and your jobs at that end today is to kind of get some of the useful stuff to the top of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's wrap up our conversation today. Let's talk about your website, findbirdhuntingspots.com. That's a unique name.
Well, geez, what a concept, when you ask my followers what they want help with, what their highest priorities are in terms of what they need. Number one on the list, find new places to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
When I basically revamped my website, I thought, well, that's what I do every day, whether it's on TV, podcast, or anything else. Why don't we just make a whole website devoted to that? I'll tell stories about the places I go, give advice on finding those places. That has served everybody extremely well. And you're right. Nobody's thought of the name before. I can't believe it was available, but
I know.
It seems to work.
Well, it pretty much says it all. And I think it's great the way that your television and writing experience can tie into the podcast. The podcast, of course, ties into the website as well. But it's a very cool website. And I guess that's probably the number one thing I hear from people too. Even in Texas, whether it's big game, whatever, I need to find a place to hunt. I mean, if you're not fortunate to own a ranch or own a piece of property, which in Texas we're 99% privately owned. The question I get asked all the time is, I want to hunt this, and where can I do it? Well, let's find a place.
Well, I did a seminar on that Saturday, and these were hardcore wild bird hunters. And half of the places I suggested they might want to look for more information on that topic, they'd never thought of before. For example, we all know about Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service. But there's great hunting on Bureau of Reclamation land, Army Corps of Engineer land, state school fund lands. All of those are wide open. We own them.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody looks at those.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And there's a lot of there is public land in Texas to hunt. And I'm like, here, let me send you to this website, because there's all kind of, if you want to go out and shoot a doe or take your kid hunting on their first trip, there's places to go. And there's good opportunities.
If I remember correctly, you can, it's probably $50 or $60, I think. You can buy a whatever kind of a permit it is that allows you access to all sorts of walk-in land in Texas.
Yep.
It may not be near as big a variety as it is in South Dakota, but there is such a thing.
Yeah, we can, and a lot of times Texas Parks and Wildlife will shut down state parks in certain areas, certain times of the year, and allow hunting for short periods of time as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably one of our best kept secrets is the public hunting program in the state of Texas, because everybody's hunting on own property, but there are lots of opportunities out there. So you just got to, like you said, find birdhuntingspots.com. You got to go out and find them. You got to look around, do a little research, but they are out there. Scott Linden of Scott Linden Outdoors has been our guest this week. Go to the website, find birdhuntingspots.com. Check out Wingshooting USA television, and of course the Upland Nation podcast, and Scott's many writings over some of the best outdoor magazines out there. Scott, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time to join us this week on Hunting Matters.
That's my line. I enjoyed the heck out of it. Thank you to you both.
You bet. You bet. Thanks so much, Scott.
Yeah.
Hunting Matters is a Houston Safari Club Foundation production, hosted by HSCF Executive Director Joe Bitar and Ramon Robles. Produced by Ramon Robles. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For questions or more information, email us at info@wehunt.wegive.org.